Hey, good morning to you. Welcome in. This is 93.1 and the mighty 1190. It's about 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. Frank Aikmus joins us this morning. He's our county commissioner. And how you doing, Frank?
I'm great, Jane. Hope you are.
We haven't seen you since the cook-off, which we appreciate you coming in and volunteering to judge for. And you talk about I hate to put you on the spot, Archie, but just so you know, we raised all together for Hometown Heroes. How much was it? And ballpark it?
I'm going to round it up a little bit with our donation, $35,000.
Well, that's the best we've ever done. There you go. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for helping us that day.
Absolutely. Always happy to.
Frank, no problem. All right, so this whole deal is going on now with the rate increase for customers and for water, and it's got very complicated and, in my opinion, very political. But I guess that's just the nature of things. We wanted to bring you in because all the commissioners have a different, everybody voted what they thought was the best vote.
Right.
And we wanted to bring people in and get you to explain why you voted the way you did.
Sure. And let me say this, the average voter, I'm not trying to insult you.
No, not at all.
Frank and the other board of commissioners have been studying this thing for 9 years or so.
You said since 2011.
Yeah. The average voter is not going to understand this because it is complicated, and the workshops are online. Mm-hmm. Go watch them yourself. They are hours in length, and it's complicated business. When we had significant damage here to this radio station, and it came time to rebuild it, I entrusted my engineers to tell me what we needed to do. I'm not an engineer. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I counted on them making their recommendations.
Right.
I think that's going to be the case with this particular project as far as when people go to the polls.
Right.
Because I don't think most people are going to understand about it. And sometimes you have to go out on faith with our elected officials as to they made the best choice they thought was necessary.
Right.
So regarding this particular project, which includes the water treatment plant and so forth, you were for this. So explain why.
Sure. I can remember back in 2008 when basically Union County shut down. We had a moratorium.
Yeah.
We were closed for business. And I think that some elected officials came along and decided that was not ever going to be the case again in this county if we could find a suitable solution. And I think when the county undertook the process by which they went about reaching the Yadkin-Norwood project, you got to remember we looked at over 12 other options. And when you look at the 400 pages and review the environmental impact analysis and the environmental impact statements, cost-wise, this is by far the best answer to providing that long-term water solution for Union County for many, many years, for at least the next foreseeable 50 to 75 years.
Now, what about the argument, and it's been made, and a lot of people have heard it and agree with it. What about the argument that this is not going to do anything to help people who live east of where we are now that may have, or up towards Fairview, may for a long time have thought, we're going to get county water one of these days, and wells are bad, and they want something. So is this going to help those folks at all?
Well, let me put it back on you, Shane. If you didn't have a water source to provide to those people, how would you ever fix that problem?
Yeah.
And that's what simply this does, is it gives us the resource to finally be able to work on our 2050 comprehensive plan, to work on our water and master sewer plan, to finally be able to provide those individuals with good quality drinking water. That's why I supported the Yadkin project, because that's exactly what it does.
But only $5 million has been allocated to help these people.
Only $5 million has been allocated to eliminate the backlog of what was the short-term water line extension. Back in, I can't remember exactly the year, I want to say it was 2012, 2013 maybe, we started replaced what was known as the short-term help for people that had bad wells and arsenic and manganese in their water. And I think the funding on that was around $500,000, maybe $650,000. What we have done essentially with some of these rate increases is fund that $500 million to eliminate the backlog, because essentially people would go in and sign up, they'd go on a list, and if we had enough money out of that $650,000, we'd get to their project. Well, you can imagine the magnitude of the problems that exist out there, because there isn't water in a lot of those areas.
Frank, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but on the committee I'm on, when the presentation was made from environmental health, they showed a map of North Carolina's white map. It showed all the counties, and with a red dot where all the bad wells were.
Right.
It practically obliterated the white in Union County.
That's
correct.
correct.
And it's focused. It's just uncanny. You look at the entire state, and boom, right here in Union County is just prolific. I had no idea.
Yeah.
That it was that bad.
Yeah, there is a large slate belt that runs right through this area, and when you have slate in the ground, slate leads to arsenic.
Really?
Yeah. So
Yeah. I mean, it's bad. I can see the frustration of those people that are having to buy bottled water to do everything,
As can I.
including bathe in. To see a project of this magnitude, and they don't feel like they're being addressed.
well, and again, I understand that they feel like it's not being addressed. Is it going to happen overnight? No, it's not. But without a water source, it will never happen.
All right, so what areas will benefit from the water treatment plant? What areas?
I would say Union County.
Well, specific parts of it. I mean, there's areas this water can't go to, right, because of interbasin transfer.
It's going to be everything in the Yadkin River or the Rocky River subbasin. So we don't have water issues on the western side of this county in the Catawba River Basin. What
Right.
this does is it eliminates the need, because under state law, anything that you pull from the Catawba into the Yadkin has to move back, whether it's
Right.
clean water, raw water, whatever, it has to go back. This eliminates that.
When you have a water treatment plant, you're asking for more density in your growth. I mean, it's just by nature of it.
Well, I think you have to look historically. Union County has been growing for years and years, and I don't see any reason that it's not going to continue.
But people in some of these areas don't want growth. Just ask them. Indian Trail and all that. It's like what's been happening is the subdivisions and the big apartment complexes and all go in, and then we worry about the infrastructure with transportation and water and all that. Is kind of an after the fact kind of thing. A lot of these people in these areas would like to see us slow down and catch up before we add more 400 homes here and 300 there and that kind of thing.
I hear what you're saying, Archie, but I go back to this is the water source that will provide safe drinking water for the residents of this county that have waited, most of them, all their lives to get. And without it, you don't have that. Is growth going to happen? Yes, it's going to happen. Can we control that? We have to depend on some of those municipalities to tighten up their restrictions. If they want to stop density, they need to work with us.
Well,
Perhaps we need to look at some interlocal agreements with some of these individual municipalities that if you're going to approve a project that's going to use county resources or water and sewer, then we need to have some agreement.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. And people need to, the voters need to understand there's how many municipalities?
14 or 15?
14. The county doesn't control what they do.
That's correct.
Well, I'm a firm believer, have been since this first came out, that this is a byproduct of people before you and before this current board period kicking the can down the road.
That's exactly right.
There comes a point eventually where somebody has to do something, and the longer it goes without somebody doing something, the more expensive it's going to be when it gets done. So you said yourself earlier that 2008 the county hit the brakes.
That's right.
That would have been a good time to start working on this kind, but they didn't, and now you guys are the people that happen to be on the board that have to do this.
Just to simplify things, is that what's happened here? We've needed this water source, or saw the need for it years ago, and no sitting board wanted to be the one to tackle it? Is that pretty much it?
I think that's somewhat fair. I think when you look at the board that was elected back in 2010, which was Todd Johnson, Jonathan Thomas, and Jerry Simpson, they made one of their priorities is to secure a long-term water solution for this county.
Mm-hmm.
And, they started the process of working with staff and going out and looking at these 12 alternative options. And they approached Alligator Water. They looked at groundwater. They looked at Anson County. They looked at Blewett Falls. They looked at various other sources. Mm-hmm. But when it came down to it, the most affordable and the one that was most willing to work with us to provide this long-term solution was Norwood.
Well, that's another thing that you said that I think a lot of people don't know and need to know is this isn't all contingent on what we want. It's contingent on what other people are willing to do. Correct. Too. Maybe that was unfair of me saying in 2008 they were trying to work on it, but they didn't have the agreement to work on. All this is two-sided.
Right. You didn't have a source to draw from.
Yeah.
A willing source. And that's what we were able to. Now,
I will say the only argument that I've heard against using alligator water, and I say that because that's who I have and love the water and tickled with it. It's more expensive than it would be if we control our own water source. But I think other people's thought process is, it's more expensive, but if we're willing to pay it, it's a lot less expensive to get it to us than this would be. So is there any truth to that?
Well, I'm not going to get into the financial argument about it, but what I will say is my charge as a commissioner is to ensure that we provide a long-term water source. Well, when you looked at alligator water, yes, you could get the water to the county line, but that doesn't include that's what a lot of the naysayers are saying is it's cheaper to get it to the county line. Well, you can get it to the county line, but you still don't have the transmission lines to disperse it throughout the county. And I'm sorry, but when you look at alligator water, and I have done it, you look at their financial statements. They haven't been profitable since 2012. They have lost money every year since 2012. In 2017, they lost over close to $900,000. They pay their CEO $437,000, and they pay a consulting company that he owns $367,000 a year. I'm sorry, that's not a reliable source of water for the citizens of this county, and so I could not sign off on that.
I got you. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. See, these are all things people don't know. All they do is get on Facebook and they see something that says, "Oh, well, we could get it from this for $50 million, or we could get it from that from $30 million." And
if we continue to kick this can down the road, is this a project that, in your mind, we would have to do eventually at some point?
Absolutely.
We've got to do it.
Absolutely. You don't have a choice unless you're just going to shut down this county completely from ever growing, which some people might say that's a good thing.
Okay, well,
I'm sorry, but let's talk about the bypass that we spent 20 years to get.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of what this project is around is to be able to equalize that tax base. So right now your tax burden is 83% on the backs of homeowners.
That's a long time.
We now have infrastructure to bring through.
Yeah.
And if we don't have this water source, we will never attract industrial
that whole
manufacturing growth.
That whole lopsidedness of the tax base is real. I mean, there's not up for debate. No. That's the truth.
Well, that's been concerning for quite some time.
A long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so basically, there were a dozen plans or so that were looked at. All of them were looked at extensively, and in the minds of the people who worked on this for the last 10 years, this is what's most affordable for the county.
This is the most affordable
that will
plan.
secure the most water.
It's the most economic. It's the most environmental friendly, and it answers the problem that this county's had for many years.
The figure being thrown about is $900 million. Is that correct? Is that a correct figure?
If you were to do everything that staff presented to the Board of County Commissioners, it is $900 million. What has been approved is $305.8 million.
Okay.
And that is to basically build the Yadkin Water Project. And there are some other ancillary things, like there's some sewer improvements over in Waxhaw. There's an elevated water tank in Indian Trail. There's some improvements to some pressured districts. Mm-hmm. But no, nothing has been approved other than $305.8 million.
Okay. What about the fact that we don't have all the permits This project isn't permitted yet.
That's correct. There is one permit that's outstanding. We anticipate having that at the end of February.
Okay, you don't see any problems.
We have worked with Duke Energy. We have worked with all of the parties to get this thing done.
Okay.
And it is in its final phases.
Let me ask you about Marshville. They thought they had a deal struck, and now they're being told we may not because of this project. Where does Marshville stand?
I don't know that it's we may not because of this project.
Yeah.
I think the issue that we have with Marshville right now is there's a lot of politics being played. And frankly, we had an agreement with Marshville. Marshville came back to the table after we thought we had settled this and said, well, we want this or we don't want to do this. And so the agreement has kind of changed. So we have met as a board and sent our legal representatives back to Marshville to say, here's what we agreed on. Where do we go next?
Yeah.
Personally, I think we need to have a sit down with the two boards because I don't think all the information is getting disseminated to the elected officials.
There was such contentiousness, and then they finally got together and worked it out.
And another thing people need to know, and you can look at this as a good or a bad, but there are parts of this county that may very well, let's assume that the permit comes back right, everything's good, it gets built, and the rate increase happens, and everything goes the way it's supposed to go. A lot of people are talking about sewer and how there are probably the majority of this county that we're not running sewer lines everywhere there are people that will have access to water and still be on a septic tank. So this isn't a dual, we got to run sewer everywhere we're running water.
That's right.
Kind of thing. And that'll balance some of the, because you're not spending the same amount of money to run it this way as you are run it this way.
That's exactly right.
Give me a little more on the bad wells.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. Without a water source, we never could help those people. So we get the water source. It doesn't mean you're guaranteeing everybody's going to have water. I mean, the problem is the county's big and water lines are expensive, and you hear somebody say, "Well, there's water a mile from my house." Well, that's a lot of pipe.
Correct.
It's expensive. Is the goal of the board to try to get as much water these rural bad well areas as possible?
The goal of this board is to provide safe drinking water, which I believe that's what we've done with the Yadkin project. The second goal in the short water line extension program that did exist was to provide funds for those people who came and petitioned the county and said we would like to hook on to county water. Mm-hmm. That's what the $5 million or $500 million is for. Yeah, $5 million is for, is to provide a resource to actually start building some of those lines.
And what you mean by that is these are people who have come forward and said, I'm willing to pay my money. Mm-hmm. If y'all will bring it to me, this is $5 million worth of those people.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's exactly
but not a ton of money as far as water line costs are concerned.
It's not a ton of money, Archie, but when you look at, you were funding at $650,000 and now you're putting $5 million in to clear up the backlog of the people that were already on the list and fund $5 million every year in the future.
Is that what it is? I was going to ask you. It's
okay,
initially
see, I was
$5 million.
confused by that. All
so,
right.
So it's $5 million a year towards the short
That's
line.
what this board has committed to. Now, can another board change that? Of course.
Yeah.
But what we've committed to is we're going to provide $5 million to clean up the backlog, and then in following years, I think it's 2021, 22, we're going to fund an additional $5 million to continue that, so that we can put these transmission lines. What I don't see any good coming from us going out here and running county water lines all over this county if there are people that love their well that don't want to be on county water.
And there are some of those.
There are some of those.
And there are also some people that will put in a filtration system and
be happy.
And they're good with it. There are plenty of people that do that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about the bypass because I was on it this weekend, and I mean there's nothing on it. Mm-hmm. Would love to see industrial parks and stuff out there, especially with the disparity of our tax money. We really need that. And I know you're a board of county commissioners, so there's not but so much you can do. But insofar as what you can do, are we being aggressive with trying to attract these type of businesses? Are there grants? Are there matching funds, tax
I
incentives.
think when you look at what we did in the last year, it's probably our largest year economic development wise in the history of this county. The problem that we've had is that we have not had water. So the businesses that we are having to attract are low water users, which means that you're limited on who you can attract to this area because you can't provide the resources that they need.
You
to
think one of
operate
the
their
first
business.
one of the first questions I asked, sewer and water.
Of
It's one of the
course.
first causes.
Of course.
You take a plant like something I use, for example, Tyson. They use a lot of water.
There's a lot of water. Yeah. Now, are those people? Do they have contracts for their water?
Most of them do. Yes.
So they may or may not.
They may or may not be
affected by the increase.
Correct.
At least until the agreement's up.
That's right.
And then
It's disingenuous to say that this rate increase is going to cause undue strain on some of these businesses because they're contractually obligated for a period of time. Now, are we going to renegotiate that contract based on the cost that we're incurring? Of course we will.
Yeah.
We'd be foolish not to.
Yeah. And of course, the schools need water, so even people with a well and septic will see some sort of increase
Potentially.
because the school tax part would have to go up
Potentially.
to cover their new water bills.
Yeah.
How long will this? So you're waiting on the permit. You hope to get next month. And if that's approved, when would construction start? How long would it all take? And then we got to run lines and all that. So how long is this?
Once we get the permit, we're already working with Norwood because if you actually read the contract, the town of Norwood is actually the one that has to initiate the acquisition, the property acquisition to run these lines. That work is in progress. Obviously, we can't go into a neighboring county and say we're going to acquire property as a governmental agency.
Yeah.
So that's part of the contract. I would say that we're going to move as expeditiously as we possibly can to get this thing in the ground and start pumping water into this county.
We're still looking at some years.
Correct. Archie, you got to remember this is a 10-year plan, and we're in about year 8.
Yeah.
And we've spent about $27 million so far. We still have a lot more to spend and a lot more work to do.
Just on the planning and stuff.
That's correct.
And with no shovel in the ground yet.
That's right.
This is something that listeners and voters deserve to know, and I know you well enough. Know you tell me the truth when I ask you this question. The board that's seated now that's working on this. There will be people who run for the same office you hold or the same position you hold on the basis that they'll stop this.
Correct.
How much of what we're talking about doing now is going to happen? Like in other words, how much of this project, if everything goes through, will actually happen without another board being able to stop it? Any?
Well, I mean, let's say that they come up with 3 votes to kill what we've just done. They can stop it. Now, do I think that's prudent? No, I do not. And that's obviously why I voted, and 2 of my other colleagues joined me, and one has obviously come out since the vote and said, well, he supported the Yadkin Water Project. He didn't necessarily support some of the other ancillary spending because he wanted more money to go to the Yadkin Water Project up front. Fine. So you've got 4. So you replace one of us or 2 of us, and there's only one other candidate on the Republican side, and there's 2 Democrats. So potentially you could replace both of us, and you may get 3 votes there. But there's no guarantees there because anybody that studies this project and reviews it is going to agree that this is by far the most prudent financially and environmentally the best project.
Because that would be the absolute worst case scenario, is to start on all this and then somebody come along and say, oh, no, we don't want to. But that would be probably wouldn't happen. I mean, I just know people are thinking about it.
Right.
Why is continued residential growth in the county so important?
Well, residential growth, whether we like it or not, does drive commercial growth.
Yeah, they won't be where people are.
That's right. I mean, you don't see targets and manufacturing jobs where they don't have a workforce, and the workforce has to have a place to live. So residential growth is always going to help drive economic development.
It bothers me that the figures from the latest comprehensive plan, 70% of people in the county work outside the county.
Correct.
And
is it that high, really?
It's that high,
probably
according to the
about
study,
that.
yeah. That means they're spending at least some of their money in another county buying gas, whatever, food, yeah.
clothing.
And when you buy stuff outside the county, that county gets the taxes
That's
on it.
correct.
So that's troublesome. And then I ride the bypass and it's empty, and it'd be like, nice to have some plants out there where people in Union County can work and,
right.
and stay here, that kind of thing.
And I think we're doing all the right things. When you look at what's happening at South Piedmont, they're working closely with our economic development group. They're working closely with our Chamber of Commerce. We're doing all the right things, but we cannot attract that business without a source of water.
If I'm hearing what you've said this morning and the research I've done, growth aside, if there was a moratorium on growth, we need this project anyway.
Regardless, because you can't provide the water that so many people have promised to these folks on the eastern side of the county without a clean drinking water source.
And see, therein lies, and that's what I meant at the very beginning of this interview when I said this is a byproduct of other. What he said is true. There were people in the past that promised people water.
Yeah.
And they never got it. And those people were promised it, and they didn't get it, so it's not their fault. And Frank wasn't the fellow who promised them, so it's not his fault. But at some point, something's got to get done.
All right, we keep hearing about, and correct the math. Math was I'm not good at. 15.5% in February, and then again in January.
Correct.
To me, that's 31%. Where are we getting 33% from?
I only work in banking, so I'm not great at math either. But anytime I add 15.5 and 15.5, I come up with 31.
I'm not sure exactly.
It's a great talking point.
Okay, but what is that actually in a normal family of four water bill? How much are we talking about?
An average water user in Union County uses about 5,000 gallons.
Yeah, that's
okay,
like the basis.
So
yeah.
On average, you're looking at about a $4.50 increase
per month.
That's basically, if you add sewer in that, you're probably looking at about $11.
Okay, yeah.
So
what
that's
you would have to do,
right?
Yeah. Now I feel for the people on fixed incomes, that kind of thing.
As do I.
But if I've got to pay $11 to $15 more a month, so I know, if my friend out in the country's going to get water when he's got arsenic in his well, then
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a problem. I feel for those people. I'm on. I've been on county water. I'm on city water, and so I don't have that problem. I feel for my neighbors that do, because it's a real thing.
Absolutely, it is.
And this is one of those things. This is one of those proverbial sandwiches that nobody made, but everybody's got to take a bite of.
Right.
It's just
right.
way. And listen, even if this doesn't, if for some reason this didn't, there would be another plan. It's eventually going to have to happen.
We're going to pay for it somewhere.
Or it's going to be these people really won't get water unless individual agreements are.
They can't. And if we kick the can down the road, this will be $1.5 billion.
The cost continues to escalate. I mean, we saw that when we first looked at this project to today. It went up $100 million.
What made it go up $100 million?
Well, you had a number of lawsuits that you had the River Keepers, you had Stanley County, you had Montgomery County, you had various lawsuits that were involved. Obviously, when we first started looking at this project, the economy was not where it is today. The cost of goods have gone up exponentially. There are more people working, therefore you're going to have to pay a higher price to get people to do the job.
Let's not forget about the consultants.
That's right. I mean, so there is a cost increase, but I think when you look back at where we started and where we are today, we're in a much better position to secure safe, reliable drinking water for this county.
Yeah.
I do want to say at the end, I don't consider any of these people who had to vote on this evil or bad. That's the whole reason we have a board. Is you're supposed to vote your conscience.
Correct.
For people.
It's easy to sit back on
Armchair.
your computer
Yep.
and talk about how you three are lining your pockets with developer cash. I know you guys,
No.
and I don't believe
That's
that to be
simply
the
not
case.
the case.
But for y'all to come out and I mean, you knew this wouldn't be popular.
No.
You had to know when you voted for it.
Absolutely.
So you put in my mind's eye, you took what was best for the county priority ahead of
Yes.
personal gain.
This is not about personal interest or personal gain. This is about doing what I was elected to do, and that is represent the people in this county to ensure that public safety and public health is our top priority.
And, and like I say, that's the reason we have an odd number of people on the board, is because that may seem different depending on who's. But anyway, we appreciate you coming in and talking to us about it. Hopefully the listeners can at least glean a little bit more than they did before. And we just want our people to know what's going on.
And I appreciate
why people voted the way they did. And then it's up to them.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The beauty of America.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you,
sir.